Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Your brain, your mind, this light. What's the difference? I want to do a little thought exercise, a little thought experiment with you. This question comes up in different forms, and sometimes it's hard to verbalize. But in terms of our modern society, science, neuroscience, looking at the functions of the brain, as Buddhists, and this is why I'm having this conversation with you, not to compare notes on how fascinating our brains are or make you scientists or pose as a scientist, yes? In a way, as I wrote many, many years ago in a book on Buddhism as the science of the mind, we're all scientists in that we use the scientific method every day to problem solve. Set that aside for a moment. I just want to talk about the big questions that a lot of us who pursue Buddhism as a practice have often thought about. Who am I? How am I? What's my purpose? Why do I think I am? What am I doing here? All of those versions, yeah? And hopefully after this conversation, not only will you have a little bit more insight on those questions, but my hope, of course, is that I will lead your thinking to a better understanding, a better concept for yourself of why the hell we practice. What is this Buddhism trying to do? What is enlightenment like? What does that look like, feel like, touch like, right? So I was watching this program on PBS Nova about who's in control, talking about the brain specifically. Of course, science is a physical investigation. So yeah, we're in Samsara here. But there's a lot of clues in Samsara. And they talk about sleepwalking and all that, all the stuff you've already heard. What caught my ear, though, was that the brain, they estimate, has some 90 billion neurons. And without going into all of the biology and chemistry of the brain, the neurons being the communications, the identified portion of the brain that's actually dealing with information, doingness, energy plus action. I know, Buddhists, you hear that. You hear, wait, karma? Energy is being tasked in the brain constantly. Wow, that's an engine. That's an engine. Creating cause and effect actions to apply to energy. There's a karmic engine going on there. And just to draw the analogy, because you probably already have, it's no different than the universe. Energy manifesting into all manner of potential. The universe, not unlike the brain. There's a continuity throughout everything, right? You could take apart a flower and find in its makeup these engines, super simple or super complicated. Obviously, the human brain, a very complicated one. But let's move away from that for a moment. Let's just put that in our little data bank for our experiment today. 90 billion. So I don't need to tell you that a few thousand, 100,000, a million of those neurons are occupied with keeping my heart pumping, adjusting my chemistry levels, my blood sugars, getting the liver to do what it needs to do, moving fat cells around, sifting through blood, my immune system, all these amazing components of the human body, your body, are actively being controlled by groups of these neurons, and you're not even thinking about it. You're not, what would we say, conscious of it. But we know it's happening. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here breathing and talking to you, right? So intellectually, yeah, we know that. We just don't pay attention to it. So this is the experiment I want to do with you. I want you to imagine, and this shouldn't be much of a leap, that each of those, let's just say 90 billion, it's an approximation, but 90 billion, that's such a huge number. 90 billion neurons in your brain, in this little 3-pound thing in your container here. And I want you to visualize that each one of those 90 billion neurons is a version or a duplicate or an instantiation of you. I mean, give it arms, legs, a head, a body. Make it a little worker in your brain. Sure, it's tiny, but it's a you. Right? Like, my name's Sylvain. I have 90 billion Sylvains in this skull, running around, busy, 24/7, 365, constantly. I just want you to digest that for a moment. Really not that hard to do, I hope. Each of these neurons has a mission it carries out over and over and over and over and over. Sometimes very aggressively, sometimes it relaxes. Some of those neurons, some of those Sylvains that are running the heart, they never stop. As I get older, they get a little more tired, a little more worn out. New Sylvains are created from my bone marrow chemically to go up and replace some of those old ones. Okay, you're out of here. You're going out in excrement. You're done. You're extinct. I'm here now. I'm taking over. Wow, what is going on in that brain of ours? Really, I want you to really contemplate this. That not only are there 90 billion Jones, Bettys, Mustafas, whatever, but they're also being replenished and going extinct constantly. 90 billion, it's happening constantly, right? All right, we can just meditate on that for a week, yeah? I don't want to get stuck there. I just want you to really consider that as a way of understanding what's going on in your brain. I haven't talked about the mind yet. Now I'm going to introduce another piece of information. there's a left and a right brain. Yeah? And those two hemispheres of the brain actually work independently. How many billions of neurons in each? The number of them isn't as important as the fact that they actually are different. They share some things, but the left and right brain, they've identified in groups, in billions of neuron groups, tend to work on different things. Not only the right brain influencing largely the left side of our bodies, and vice versa with the left and right. We've known about this forever, right? Well, seems like it. But they've also identified, and they showed this in the program, that when light information comes into your eyeballs and then to your brain from the right side of your body, it's your left side of your brain that sees it. And information coming from the left side of your body is seen by the right side of your brain. So how is it that you and I experience all of it all at once? That's because there's this great highway, the callosum, I forget the full name, but it's this huge bundle of connections between the two hemispheres that share information. So I might see something with the right side of my brain, but the right side of my brain don't know how to talk about it. So it sees it, but when you ask it, it says, I didn't see anything. But then you say, well, draw it out on a piece of paper, and sure enough. So it saw it, it just doesn't know how to talk about it, unless it communicates to the left side of the brain where the speech centers are. Even though it saw with the right side of the brain, the left side of the brain goes, oh yeah, I know what that is, and it tells you. And they know this because they've separated the two hemispheres. And they're able to see this function. It's amazing, right? It's astounding how wow, look at how the brain works. But now, here's where I want to tie Buddhism into this. It's quite obvious as this program goes on, and we're talking about these 90 billion little yous, all hard at work, doing their thing, that there's communication going on. There's sharing going on in there. There's quite a cacophony of conversation going on in there. Now, scientifically, they can't identify the conversation. All they can do is identify the movement of energy, electrical signals, but that's energy. How they're transferring information to one another, still mysterious. But look, we're Buddhists. We understand what's happening there. We should have just had a big aha moment. Energy, communicating, interacting, that's action. That's consciousness. That is the mind. That is what you can't grasp. You can't grasp this flow of energy as a thing, but you know it's occurring. Is that the brain? No, the brain is the neurons and the actions taken by the physical neuron activity, but the communication, what's the word? It's escaping my neurons are getting old. Our agency, our collection of the way we enact the actions, the communications of those neurons, we superimpose a map on them and we influence. So if you're looking for mind, in a word, it's influence. It's self-influence. It's, but even more to the point of Buddhism, the influences of the mind don't occur solely in the brain. They do occur in the brain, but they're also affected, influenced by all of our senses, our consciousnesses. So what we see, hear, feel, taste, those are influences that are brought into our brain and form a communication telling billions of copies of us, directing them to either simply do the act that you do, simple, make the heart beat, or consider, abstract, and communicate, much more fluid. That consciousness becomes an amalgam of a lot of sensory inputs that then the neurons throw around to make some kinds of valuations of and make statements on, based not only on the new sensory input, but the history of memories, sensory inputs from the past, comparing and contrasting, and coming up with an estimate. Now, this is very important and applies to our Buddhist practice. If you understand so far what I've been saying, and you may have to go back but the strong suggestion is here that although we think that we make concrete decisions, that we make decisions based on fact, that we know what we are doing. How many times have you said that in your life? The actual fact of the matter, the truth of the matter, is everything that we think and do in samsara is our best estimate. And it's based on previous best estimates. Now consider that for a few moments, because that is a house of cards. It may seem sturdy, but it can very easily go pff. All it takes to knock that house of cards down is a piece of information that crashes all the previous assumptions. How far back do those assumptions go? In Buddhism, we know they go back to before you came into the womb. That's the karmic freight train. That we're constantly 90 billion in each moment, 3,000 realms, forming new associations, beliefs, facts. That word becomes kind of fluid really quickly, doesn't it? Wow. Now ask yourself, who's in control? The brain isn't in control. It's just responding and doing. What's running the brain influences. Where are these influences coming back through? Our dull senses. It's amazing we exist and continue to exist. But what's most and that's exciting. But what's most, and what bends my brain the most, is that still we wake up every morning with this concrete idea of I am a self that I know and that everybody sees, and I project that knowingness all the time. What foolish, what foolish assumptions. It's a wonder we don't forget who the hell we are with every night's sleep. This is ongoing all the time. 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. That's what that's about. The mind is a very fluid and moment-to-moment estimation of what we need to survive, to exist. And what Shakyamuni did, basically, is identify that as problematic because the setup is there. The setup is this has to be managed in order for me to survive. And if it needs to be managed, it means that intrinsically, I know this is all estimation, and I have to scurry about every moment of my life managing how do I adjust that, how do I adjust that, I need more of that, I need less of that, I must need this, that makes me feel good, let me go that way, well, how much feel good do I need, all this management, these middle managers in our heads. There's 90 billion in there, so you know there's a good half of those billion that are just running around with opinions, managing the others, and they don't always make good choices. But then we have repercussions, and we try to adjust to the repercussions. This is what's going on constantly in samsara. This is where all our stress and anxiety comes from, right? Obviously. The communication, the mind of management. And so, Buddhism, why do we practice? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. We want to get that mind to be less inundated, immersed, drowning in the communication of 9 billion yous, to elevate itself, words being what they are, to get a disconnected picture of all of that action, but from an unemotional, unattached vantage point. When we do that, suddenly we realize that the you that we're managing in our brain is actually, we start to see our brain grow as not just this organ in the skull, but all of the inputs, the influences of others, of the weather, of the altitude, of the country, of the politics, of the education, of the on and on and on and on. Now we've gone from 90 billion yous to what's the language of Buddhism? Incalculable, unfathomable. How many grains of sands of 80,000 Ganges rivers, world systems? Make no mistake, that's what Shakyamuni's talking about. He's taken this incredible number of neurons in the brain, 90 billion, and he's made every atom in the universe a neuron. When you look outside in the summer and it's all green, that's a huge influence on how you perceive yourself. In the winter, everything's gray, maybe snow on the ground, maybe not, depends on where you live. Completely different influence. Putting those few neurons in your brain to task differently. In other words, the illusion that our brain exists in our skull and therefore our mind, the mind is much larger because the mind can think outside the box, can see that the brain, the processing of consciousnesses includes, is not separate from the environment, all of it. Other people, other trees, space, stars, so on. How many copies of you is that? And this becomes less about identity and more about amalgam. Now, your mother, your sister, your neighbor, your friend, your lover, they're not other. Provisionally, they're in different packages, but their influences are part of our brain. Our influences are part of their brain. How could they not be? That is the mind of Buddha-ness. Now, can it make sense to you? The compassion of Buddhism is not a I feel this way about you. The compassion of Buddhism is this is all being together, one, experiencing. Why would I want that part of me that I see in you to be in stress, in anxiety, to experience pain? I don't want that. Any more than I want my right foot to suddenly develop all kinds of pain, suffering, damage, whatever. The separation is just, it's an illusion, it's an operating thing. But our minds, they're not individual, they're combinatory, if you want to make up a word. It's a huge amalgam of the experience of life. Does that affect how you value that around you? What is the dignity of life then separated from the ego, right? Some people confuse dignity with ego. But real dignity, Buddhist dignity, amalgamated consciousness, Buddha mind, life dignity, the individual is just a handy container, like holding a cup in the rain. The rain doesn't only exist in the cup or for the cup. You're just communicating, interacting, influencing a portion of, a location of the rain. I think that's an interesting mental exercise. I wonder, was that useful for you? Did that click any neurons for you? So then all of those Sylvain neurons that I identified earlier, they're really not Sylvain neurons. They're life neurons. Life neurons that have different outfits they wear. And that's perception, right? But experientially, all the same. They're all stick figures, universal. And I can influence them, and they influence me. Pay attention. How am I being influenced? How is my experience being influenced? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. So Buddhism is a focused practice of enlightened influence on our samsaric identifications. Right? Yeah. Interesting experiment. Anyway, let me know if that was useful. Let me know if that brought up some questions for you. It's a complex thing, but how does it make you think about your practice? Okay, I'm going to stop that there, and I'm going to get back to Nichiren on karma now. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's so important to help the algorithms, to help this Sangha grow, to help support as many people who are seeking the correct practice for themselves. Several new subscribers lately. Thank you so much, not only for subscribing, but participating, being part of our Sangha. Please look at the video on how to use this resource. Videos, threefoldlotus.com, the free information on the website, the books, the ebooks, as many things as I can provide. The podcasts you can download for free, right? And supporting, not just liking and subscribing is a support, but of course we have patrons on Patreon. Thank you. And we have those of you who are doing recurring donations through PayPal. There's several ways you can support this resource. And thank you for doing that. Deeply appreciated. We all do. And I'll see you in the next one, okay? Bye for now.